everyone. My name is John Shipley, and I'm the facilities manager at the Wayne County Historical Museum. And Carrie George asked me to give you a little presentation of the Conestoga Wagon. I'm sure many of you have been in the museum before in the 4th grade, or 6th grade, or 5th grade, but the Conestoga Wagon has not been updated for many years, and the exhibits committee decided, well, let's do something about it. So they asked me to come up with some ideas, and this is a work in progress, but we're getting closer to being completed. So let me tell you a little bit of story about the Conestoga Wagon. The wagon that you see in front of you it's an original Conestoga wagon from Pennsylvania, and it's roughly around 1795. So the pioneers, when they were coming through Wayne County along the National Road, it does not look like it does today. It kind of looks like this, as you see. And it was all muddy, it was rutted, it was a dirt road. It was actually thought of by a little unknown individual named George Washington. And he had envisioned, in order for the country to grow, it needed a national road, and it needed to stretch beyond the East Coast and push into the heartland of Ohio and Indiana. And he was hoping that it would go all the way to the Mississippi River. Well, it didn't happen until another unknown individual named Thomas Jefferson. He appropriated money in the 1830s to build this road, and he commissioned a group of surveyors to decide the route of the road. But one condition, it had to go through Richmond. They can take any route they wanted, but it must go through Richmond. Why? That's been lost in history. We don't really know, but somebody had enough pull that wanted that road to be associated with Richmond. Now, when they started building this road, people flocked on it. It was the only true access of getting from point A, which is the East Coast or one of those neighboring states, to point B, which is the frontier, where we are at today. It stretched from Cumberland, Maryland, all the way to a town called Vandalia, Illinois. And that's just a little bit northeast of St. Louis. Again, the idea was to get it to the Mississippi, but they ran out of money at that period, and it stops in Vandalia, Illinois. Now, if you're making a trip today, you would just jump on I-70 and you would zoom wherever you wanted to go. I-70 was not built until early 1970s. So the national road along US 40 was the heartbeat of the nation. So it had to go along this road. That was the only real true access to get from east to west. Now, if you see, there were no real restaurants along the way, but if you can look in this wagon, you can see provisions that were made. Each wagon like this was more like a U-Haul. It's not like the movies that you see with people riding in them. Everybody walked, and all your provisions were inside this wagon. You would have to determine where you were coming from, what you were going to put into this wagon. You would not put pianos, you would not put stoves, you would not put anything that would be really super heavy go on this trip. Because remember, this wagon can only hold so much. The wagon itself weighs about 1,000 pounds, maybe a little bit more, but as you would make this journey, you would have to put your food in it because there are no restaurants along the way. The animals, you wouldn't forage along the way. So all your food, your salt, your sugar, your flour, your wheat, anything that you might eat or consume or bring with you to build on your farm would be in this wagon. Remember, it's just like a big U-Haul. Now, you ask how much food would you have? The amount of food that you would be bringing, it depends on the length of the journey, but generally, if you're provisioning for about a month, you would need about 1,000 pounds of food to go on your journey. So the poor creatures that are moving this wagon would be what you would have. Either it would be oxen, or it would be a specialized horse that was bred for this type of movement, and that was called a Conestoga horse. They are no longer alive or with us anymore. They're more extinct. And so the Conestoga horse would actually pull this wagon along its journey wherever you were going. The beauty of the National Road is that towns flourished on this road. It was the main artery to get across America. So any town that was associated with it, like Cambridge City, Dayton, Ohio, Vandalia, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Wheeling, West Virginia, any town that's associated along the National Road, including Richmond, Centerville, Cambridge City, Indianapolis, Terre Haute, Brazil, Indiana. All these towns were really flourishing until the automobile came out. When the automobile came, they could not drive on these types of roads because the roads were just too rutted, muddy. The tires would get stuck. So they had to do something with the National Road. That's when it became either a rock-based or a plank-based road or even an asphalted road. So if you go along the National Road today, you would actually see parts of it being asphalt. You would see parts of it being concrete. But we no longer have dirt on our road, and we no longer have the gravel on the road, on the National Road itself. Now, when the advent of the National Road, when it came through Richmond, Richmond really, really thrived. It had lots of industry, it had railroads, it had all kinds of stuff here because of the National Road. When in 1968, downtown Richmond had a major catastrophe. It had a gas explosion, and it basically destroyed 2 blocks of the National Road downtown. And the state officials decided to move the National Road 1 block to the north and 1 block to the south. That's where we have South A and North A. And it bypasses the main part of the downtown. Well, those businesses started suffering, and they did not have the clientele or the people passing by their storefronts day in and day out like they used to. So they started to decline that away. So they made it, and they changed the idea from a drivable access downtown to a walkable access downtown. It was called the Promenade, and it was that way from 1974 up to, I would believe, early 2000, before they decided to take that out and then make a road that winds through the downtown as we see today. So the major thing that I want to emphasize is the National Road played a very important part of our history with Richmond and Wayne County and all the counties associated along the National Road. It was so important that the Daughters of the American Revolution picked Richmond as one of the sites for the Madonna and the Child, which is a statue out in front of Glen Miller Park, right there at 22nd and East Main. So we're blessed to have all this recognition. Even presidents knew about Richmond. We've had several presidents that came to Richmond. So a lot of influential people came here over the decades. Now, I mentioned earlier that our exhibits committee wanted to maybe have a facelift of the Conestoga wagon display. So we came up with this idea. If you guys remember when you came here, there was like a farm scene behind you, and there was some split rail fences, and it was just a plywood floor. Well, we kind of modernized a little bit, and we came up with an idea of making the road look like it did back in the 1830s or 40s, with being ruts and just hard way of getting from point A to point B. There would be even trees and the stumps of the trees along your road that you would have to drive across. It was an arduous journey. It was not easy like we have today. You can only travel around 10 to 12 miles a day. And that was really hard because you had to go up and down the hills, across and ford the creeks and the rivers, and even go through rock formations as you see behind me. So we wanted to kind of give you a sense of what that might have felt like. So I'm going to step out of here and still talk to you about what I've done. Out of the generosity of some individuals, companies here, Lowe's of Richmond and also Johns Manville. All the stuff that you see here is actually made of styrofoam. And it's pretty cool and fun to do. So all you do is you layer the styrofoam and you cut it out, or you make ruts in it, and then you paint it. It's very lightweight. You can pick up these rock formations with a couple of people and move them anywhere you want. Give you an idea what it will look like. There you go. Here's an example. This is Johns Manville, and all it is 2-inch styrofoam, and they're 4x8 sheets, and all you do is stack them and you glue them together, and you wait for it to cure. It takes about a day. And then you start cutting it out with box cutters and making angles and breaks and all kinds of stuff. And then what you do is, once you've figured out your design, you paint it. You paint this whole thing black, and then you add some colors. Your black is a base coat. And then you add different colors of gray. And at that point, once you get your colors in where you think it might look kind of like stone, you take a really light, dry brush coat of white, or maybe an off-white, and it gives you that shine of a rock. And that's how you see on those rock formations. It's all styrofoam, and it takes about, I would say, a week to do. It depends on how big your project is. It's the same for the floor. You just take styrofoam, you lay out the 2-inch 4x8 sheets, and then you add layers, and then you cut ruts in it, and then you start painting. This has a base coat of black, then it has some greens in it, it has some tans, browns, and whites. So it's a lot of fun to do if you enjoy doing stuff like that. Another thing that you might notice in the video are the tree stumps. The tree stumps are made of different materials. One of the material is a form, and the form is a concrete form, a 12-inch or an 18-inch concrete form. They're tubes, and I'll show you one of those. Sorry, I'm moving on you. This just gives you an idea. You can see the form, and all you do is you add a surface. And the surface is made of what we call paper clay. Paper clay, you can find recipes on the internet. They're all over the place. You can make animals. You can make anything that you can envision with paper clay with those recipes. This is one of them. And the recipe for this one calls for flour, glue, a paper product, whether it be toilet paper, which I wouldn't suggest using right now, and since it's in high demand. So you can use paper insulation, as long as it's not the fiber. It has to be paper-based. And then you use joint compound. And then what you do is you mix this up, and it looks kind of like pancake batter. And then you add in the paper insulation, and it becomes thicker and thicker. And then once you get it to a consistency, you can actually form it into balls, little hearts. You can make birds out of it, or you can just smear it on here. And then once you put it on here, it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. And then you take the backside of a knife, like a butter knife, and you just make striations in it. And you just go, cross angles, whatever you want, and it roughs it up. Once it dries, it takes about 3 days to dry. Or if it's a small project, you can actually put it in your oven, set for about an hour at 180 degrees, and it will harden for you and cure. But if you only fan dry it or let it naturally air dry, it takes about 3 days. So once it dries, then you do your painting to whatever project you're doing. For this tree, it was basically black, just like all these other things I was telling you about. You paint it black, you let that dry, then you use burnt umber, and then you brush on burnt umber, and then you use tan or a suede or one of the lighter browns, and you put that on. And then your final coat is kind of a really super light brown. It could be, I don't know the technical names for some of these colors, but it's whatever color you want that's a really super light brown, not white. And you just lightly put it on the surface, and this is the product that you get. It was a lot of fun. I had some volunteers that came in, and we made several of these trees. And we actually made a 14-foot tree, and you can see it right down there, including the knots. So that was a lot of fun. The leaves are suspended with fishing line to make it appear that you're standing in the woods. We know that it's a difficult process to make it look like you're technically in the woods, but this is just giving you an idea of what it was like in the 1830s to the 1880s to go along the National Road. It was not an easy process. It was a very hard, long, enduring process. And I would really like to encourage you guys, once everything kind of settles down a little bit and everything starts to open up more and more, businesses will open, we hope that you would come down to visit us at the museum and check out this display. It's going to give you a different perspective of what life was like in the 1830s through the 1880s and how difficult it was to get from, say, Cumberland, Maryland to Richmond. Because again, you can only travel around 10 or 12 miles a day. It would take you a few months to get here, not a couple hours. With that, I appreciate you guys and hope to see you soon. God bless.